Okay, we'll go ahead and start. This is a special meeting of the Dayton Town Council. We'll take roll calls to make sure everyone's here. Ashley?
Here.
Stan?
Here.
Ron?
Here.
Carla? And I'm Jen, and I'm here, so all five of us are here. Okay. Agenda item number 1, litigation and cause number. So I'll explain what we're doing. Last June, we were forced to hire an attorney to defend the town against a lawsuit by the clerk treasurer. She wanted $12,000 for an attorney, and 4 of us didn't think taxpayers should pay for a clerk's attorney to argue with the town's attorney. We gave her $1,200 to cover any issues that arose on the discharge of her clerk's duties and felt that that was generous because most other towns our size give nothing or very little. She lost the lawsuit, but if she had won, the door would have been open for this clerk or any future clerk to demand any amount of money they wanted year after year after year. As the judge pointed out in the hearing, she could demand $50,000 next year or even more. We are frugal, and that very idea did not sit well with us. We thought the law about the governing body approving budgets and appropriations was clear, and the judge agreed with us. In fact, his ruling in our favor of the town said the law was clear and unambiguous, and payments for the clerk treasurer's attorney fees must be approved by the town council in the annual budget. Even though the judge ruled in our favor, he left the door open for unidentified pending matters. We suspect he was trying to save the taxpayers' money to fight an appeal by leaving a door open to negotiate a final end to the case. The clerk's attorney first offered to settle by the town paying $24,531, which is the amount owed by the clerk in legal bills, which we declined. We made it clear that we wouldn't consider any fees for anything outside of the litigation. They responded with an offer to settle for $10,000. We again said no. We don't want the taxpayer to be burdened with these excessive amounts. Our attorney said fighting the case from this point forward could likely cost another $6,000 to $8,000 on top of the 11 or so we've already had to spend. I suggested that the most we should offer is $6, the amount it could cost us to continue to fight it. This was purely a bottom line decision and nothing else. It's solely to minimize any additional cost to the taxpayer. So with all that being said, we'll have 2 motions to pass. So first, I would move to approve this settlement agreement regarding cause number 70C01-2006-CT-000112, and the town will give $6,000 toward the clerk treasurer's litigation fees for this lawsuit in exchange for a release of claims and dismissal of the case with prejudice.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Before we take a vote, is there any discussion from the council? Okay. Anything from the public? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. This is to give $6,000 towards the clerk treasurer's litigation fees, and then she will release the claims and dismiss this case with prejudice. How do you vote, Ashley?
Yes.
How do you vote, Stan?
Yes.
How do you vote, Ron?
Yes.
Carla? Yes. And I vote yes, so that passes 5-0. I would move to appropriate $6,000 for litigation fees.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion made by myself and seconded by Carla to appropriate $6,000 for litigation fees. Is there any discussion from the council? Or the public? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote on that. How do you vote, Ashley?
Yes.
Stan?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that also passes 5-0. Okay. Agenda item number 2, community crossing matching grant bid awards. Mark, do you want to?
Yeah,
All right.
so this gets a little bit complicated, so we'll start at the beginning. For what we'll call contract 1, which is the asphalt and sidewalk contract, the original estimate was $281,684 or $86. So the low bid came in at $335,826. Okay. So the low bid came in $54,140 over the engineer's estimate, which is 17% higher than the estimate. Okay. So I just wanted you to have those numbers in your mind to begin with. Now, although we bid it out as 2 contracts, in NDOT's mind, it's 1 contract. We get $221,000 more or less to community crossings for the combination of the 2. The combination of the 2 was estimated to be about $295,000. here this evening, we're just talking about contract one for the 281, and the low bid was 335 approximately. So you'll see why that's important as we go along here. Oh, that was my head scratching on.
Thank you.
Okay, so this handout shows what the original estimate was for both contracts, and then the total number, the 295,207. So BF&S Engineering has been negotiating with the low bidder, Midwest Paving, in order to get that number back down closer to their estimate. They have a verbal agreement with Midwest Paving to bring that down to 286,200. And the way they've done that is to make changes to the quantities in the contract. Those quantities would be the first one is going from 2 inches thick asphalt to 1.5 inches, okay? Ashley let me know that in the past, I was thinking wrong. I thought we always put down 1.5 inches, and we were bumping it up this year. But actually, I went back and looked at the 2017 and 2018 community crossing contracts, and it did call for the full milling and asphalt of 2 inches. However, the one we did last year, for whatever reason, was just 1.5 inches. Okay, so in the past, we've always preferred, I guess, to do the 2-inch thick asphalt. So one of the ways they negotiated with Midwest Paving is to go from 2 inches to 1.5 inches, and they said they also had overestimated the amount of rock, and now they're just pricing what rock is required. The reason they did that is for this very reason, because I told them, I said, listen, last year, the town got bit because instead of being 75-25, it's like 60-40 because the bids were so much higher. I said, so put some cushion in here so this doesn't happen again. Well, it's happened again, but they had some overage that they could bring down and negotiate with Midwest to say, hey, this is what we need to do. So, looking at this sheet, so the estimate, you'll see where it comes out to 75-25, just like we submitted to NDOT. With this new number, it will be more 73-27. So a bit of a difference, but not 60-40, I guess is what I'm getting at. So here's the complicated part. So in talking to BF&S, they said, hey, we've talked to Midwest Paving, they're willing to do this. I said, so have you got something? They said, well, you actually have to sign the contract, the bid that they submitted for 335 to meet NDOT requirements for bids received. And then, although we know verbally that they're going to work with us on this number. And I said, well, that's a bit uncomfortable, you know. So I said, what are our options? What are our options? One is that he said, hey, I can have someone from BF&S come over. They couldn't be here this evening. Come over at the August 9th board meeting and explain this better, and so we're all more comfortable with it. The other option is to rebid it with the numbers that are more accurate on the quantities. So I got a hold of NDOT and see if we could actually do that. So I called NDOT at Crawfordsville, and they said, yeah, you can rebid it. I said, well, what is NDOT's guideline? I said, so say that you were bidding out the State Road 38 project, and all the bids were over your estimate. What is that magic percentage that you say that anything over this, we gotta rebid it? And they said 15%. So we're over the 15%, we're at 17%. And that's why I was pointing out the difference there at the beginning. So we're within our right, if we choose to rebid this. The cost that we would incur is, I checked with Michelle today, and it's $130 to advertise this in the newspaper for 2 weeks. So we will incur some cost, and I don't know, but it's possible that we would incur some cost again from BF&S. So here's the question. Do we feel comfortable with the verbal agreement to bring this down to 286,200 that BF&S has with Midwest Paving? If we're comfortable with it, we take a vote and move forward, and here we go. If we're not comfortable with it, then you want to at least consider one or two things. We don't do anything until BF&S comes here, hopefully with something in hand that's more than verbal, and explains it to us at our monthly board meeting, or we rebid it. Now here's another thing. We have to have a signed contract in hand by no later than September 4th, or else we lose the money. We have time, we have over a month. So even if we chose to advertise this for 2 weeks, we'd still hit that date. But I just want you to know that we need to be paying attention and move this forward, whether it's through rebidding or waiting until the August 9th board meeting.
If they say that they'll do it at that lesser price, can't we just say, just give us a statement and sign that statement, you'll give it to us at the lower price?
Like
No,
a change order?
Something simple.
I think what I would do, this afternoon I was leaning towards, let's just rebid it all and just be done with it. But I guess what I'm leaning towards right now as I stand here is that, see, I was going to have you word your motion for the 286.2, but you can't because you have to sign the contract that was submitted, the bid that was submitted for $335,000.
And if we rebid it, what numbers did you say that they will be rebid with?
What do you mean?
So if we rebid it, are we gonna use BF&S's original estimate and just say bid again?
Well, the new number, that 286 number you see, that actually includes the speed bumps out here and the signage. That's why it's went from 281 to 286.
So we'll use the same numbers. So
Yes,
we'll rebid it
yes.
exactly the same.
Except the change would be in the quantities that the contractor.
So the
bid.
specs would change.
The spec would change. So
So that-
instead of quoting or bidding 100 ton of 53 rock, it might be actually just what's needed, which could be 47 ton.
But then
Well,
that leaves
then-
out the cushion that,
It does.
Yeah, and
It
so
does.
then somebody
It does.
says, well, we can't go down on anything.
It just seems a little unfair. One other lower bidder was only 5,000 difference. It seems like you're opening up again, and they were sitting there thinking, well, okay, we'll go ahead and redo their bid even lower.
Oh, and they could.
And you're
Yeah.
chomping out the first one where it was an honest effort to begin with.
Yeah.
It should be Midwest. They made the lowest bid, and they're willing to. Well, first of all, the key is, can you do the change order, do something, have them sign something on the side? Midwest would be a fool to tell a town they're gonna do it for something and.
but I would feel better if we had
and
something in writing.
Yeah.
That they would agree to that lower amount.
But can change orders happen before we sign?
Well, I think that I don't know that it would be called a change order, but we could get something. We would say, listen, we need something in writing. That's what
And
we
if
would
they're
say.
honest, at that time, they would do it.
Yeah.
If they say, heck, no, you better be thinking, I suppose.
Then we'd say, well, then, yeah.
So then if we get to August 9th, and BFNS comes and they don't have something, or they have something but it's not the right thing, will we still have enough time to rebid it? And
You have to do it for 2 weeks, so it'd be bids, it would be advertised until the
that's
23rd,
close.
and the bids would have to be in hand on the 30th, a week later. So you'd have 3 or 4 days with the holiday weekend.
Yeah,
You have to rebid it, couldn't turn backwards on you.
Yeah.
right.
It was gonna come back higher anyway.
I think you ought to take what you got, and they said they would do it at the lower cost, and they know they would look foolish to town, the BFNS, and the state, and everybody else, I mean. And get some kind of a written agreement or them.
Here's an interesting part of that. Their bid, Midwest Paving, I think it was $40,000 of their bid was for only mobilization. Usually, mobilization is $5,000 to $10,000.
Yeah.
So if they hadn't had their high mobilization costs just to move equipment in and out, they would have been right there at what the project estimate was.
And maybe they can take that into account, thinking.
Can, I don't really know what mobilization
It's just moving
entails, but
your equipment to town.
Their headquarters out of Carmel or someplace, ain't they?
Noblesville, I believe it is.
Noblesville.
Yeah.
But is that like moving it all here and then at the end moving it back, or like
Yes.
they move it here, they move it back, they move it here,
Yes,
they move it back?
it's, you know,
No, just
Reese,
one.
Reese Riley and Milestone have plants right here. So they don't have as far to bring their equipment.
So we
It's
can't
still a
really
lot,
lower
it's
that?
still a big number.
Maybe I'm just giving you some information. It's not negotiable. I mean, once it is,
It's not?
quantities are negotiable.
Oh,
Line items specific are not.
oh,
So, let's hold on to that for just a second. And now we'll talk about contract number 2, which is the preservation. So they were within what, $500 or something of that estimate? So, and plus we only had one bidder. There's only one company who does it in the state of Indiana.
the whole thing?
Yeah. So, I think we're good on that. I mean, they were pretty close on their estimate. And are there any questions about, I know you had several questions about it. So just so everybody knows, all those streets except Republican, so Turkey Run Court, Shakamak, Wabachi, can't think what else is on there. They all just get crack sealed. Republican gets what's actually called fog seal, which is like a seal coat, like we've done on Ricks Drive, Market Street, and College, and back there on.
They get crack sealed first.
They don't, I looked into that, they don't. They just do this fog seal is made to go down inside the cracks.
So is fog seal different than the,
That's
Stuff
slurry.
I don't
Yep,
love.
that's slurry seal,
so it is different?
it is.
Because when we did market in college, it was crack sealed
Before they put
already,
down the slurry seal.
because we were all concerned about the depth of the cracks and getting enough tar in them.
Yeah.
They did the church over here, and right now, they just did it a year or so ago, and I was round up and around there, heck, some of those cracks are an inch, 3/4 an inch wide, an inch or so deep.
That's all right.
And it didn't even fill it up anything.
You gotta clean them out good for that to be effective, you know.
Have we used fog seal before on anything?
Nope,
This is new too?
it's very, you probably won't even notice the difference in between slurry seal and fog seal.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Fog seal is what NDOT uses on state highways. Now, you'll see where they, a lot of these, to extend the life, they'll go in and, they used to be what they called chip and seal, you know, but now they fog seal all these state highways.
At least Republican's just a short, it's cheap,
It
$700,
is.
$800
Yeah.
or so yeah.
You know, it's like the slurry seal, you know, we don't know if it's gonna do what they say it's gonna do, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not for it, I'm not against it, it's cheap, if it works, fine, you know. If it doesn't work, then we won't do it anymore.
It's supposed to extend the life of that asphalt for 5 years. So really what we did we said, hey, we're going to try it out. And the reason we did college and market was, well, we're going to see how it holds up under school buses and fire trucks on market. So that was really good testing sites for us. So well, what are we in our second summer on it then? And the jury's still out as far as I'm concerned.
But the key was it was crack sealed first.
Yes.
It makes all the difference in the
Yes.
world. I would think if you didn't have a crack seal first, boy,
Well, I
it would
think
still
that-
be down in there. That's a thin solution on that. street.
Well, I think that's the difference in between slurry seal that we did last year and fog seal that we're doing this year.
So who picked the fog seal? Like did,
Engineers,
oh, BFS?
yeah.
Oh.
And I think they did it because they've done it in other towns and thought it was a better result than the slurry seal. I think is what they told me. I said, well, it's just for one block, we'll give it a try and see.
Yeah, we have to rely on the engineers, we're not,
Yeah. Yeah. They've got more experience than any of us, you know. So, anyway, okay, so we're good with that part of the contract then. Okay. So now we're going back to the larger part. So how do you want me to proceed?
I have a question.
Yeah,
So you said procedurally that NDOT needs the bid received in writing at that amount. Do we know, or can we ask NDOT, so say if the contract price changes, on their end, how is that documented?
you know, that does not affect them simply because there's a scenario. So let's say that we had estimated 335 and it comes in at 335 and we do the work, but at the end, it comes in and they say, hey, it only cost us 320. NDOT does not care. What they care about is you send back any money that you didn't use to cover that 75%. That's their only concern. And that happened in 18. That happened in 18. So that's what they're concerned about. So if I'm hearing right, then I need to get a hold of BF&S. And I'll go ahead and get a hold of Midwest too, because I know the gentleman who does that for them, and say, just so that we're on the same page here, we're looking at 286.2, not the 335. At these quantities and at this criteria. So, with that being said, do we want to reduce that asphalt from 2 inches thick to 1.5 inches thick?
What was the difference if we didn't?
It was one of many things, you know what I mean? And they didn't give me a breakdown of, you'll say 20,000 on this, 10,000 on that, or whatever.
So this,
Then we, go ahead.
so this bid that we have, 286, that they talked with BF&S and agreed upon, is still for 2 inches as opposed to the 1.5 inches. That's still for the 1.5 inches.
That was one of their cost-cutting measures, was to reduce the milling, because the milling is expensive too. The milling and asphalt from 2 inches to 1.5 inches. Which is what we did on Harrison and Pennsylvania last year.
It seems like the longer you wait to get a new bid, I don't know, I'm thinking right, but it sure seems like the chance is more that they will have work already prepared and your costs probably won't go down, they'll go up if anything.
You know,
And I think you're taking
that is a possibility, and here's the thing, if we rebid it, and the bids still come in way high, we have no room, we have to accept one of them and move forward,
Yeah.
whatever that bid is.
Yeah.
Mark, also, if we change the specs, could the engineering estimate change? Or lower,
Yes, yes,
so we would get less money.
yes, so, and that's how they came up with this, they said, so the engineers said, okay, this is what we can reduce down and still have a,
How they word it here.
They called it and not affect the integrity of the project, is how they worded it. So then they get a hold of Midwest and say, hey, so we went from this many tons to this many tons, from this to this to this to this, and they bid things by square yardage or tons. They said, at these numbers, your bid would come down to this. Are those numbers still correct with you? Let's just say it was $30 a square yard for asphalt. If we reduce the quantity, is that $30 a square yard still good? And they said, yes, it is. That's how they did that, you know. My only concern on all this is that we have to sign, even if we have something in our hands from Midwest Paving and BF&S, we still have to sign the bid and submit the contract to NDOT for $335,000, which means, even though it might come in at $286, which NDOT doesn't care, we save them money, you know. Even, we're still signing something that says, really, we're on the hook for the $335.
That's also 2-inch thick asphalt now that you have.
Yes, and there's more rock and more this and more that, you know, the cushion that they build into it.
When we did the 1.5 inches before, was it this same scenario where it was like, we gotta save money, just do
No.
1.5 inches? It was
No.
planned that way?
Yes.
It was an oversight, and it should have been 2 inches, but
Okay.
it went out to bid as 1.5 inches.
All right, there's a public comment. Would you state your name and address for the record and speak super loud?
Danny Spencer, 752 Main Street. Midwest obviously wants this contract because they came in at the lowest bid. Would it be possible, I understand you have to sign the $335,000 bid. You know, if you go back and negotiate with them and say, hey, if we rebid this, there's a possibility you could lose this altogether. Would you be willing to have an addendum to this particular contract that says, you know, we're going to change and it's going to end up being at the 286 that you were talking about. You're still signing the 335 contract, but then you have something in hand as opposed to just willy-nilly signing it. I mean, obviously they want the contract, so I think maybe they might be willing to have a side addendum to it, and that solves the problem and get, you know, what you need for that
That's what I was
contract.
saying earlier, if you could go to them and see if they'll sign
Yeah.
something.
But I thought you said NDOT required. Is it NDOT that requires us to sign the original bid?
Yes.
And you still be signing it.
Yeah.
But then there's an addendum that, you know, I think we all would feel better.
Yeah,
Nobody
they
just
don't
signs up for.
If they don't give it or say no, then you better start.
Yeah, you need something to say, hey, we had a signed agreement with
I
it.
think what that would look like, whether you call it a change order or an addendum, that would be something that was strictly a specific number. So it would be, okay, the rock costs this much a ton, whether we buy 2 tons from you or 100 tons. This costs this much, whether we buy 1 or 50. I think that's what that would look like.
So it's gonna be spelled out in quantity.
It would be spelled out in line item, not in quantity, because the quantity can vary, you know, but it would be, you know, your asphalt's this much a ton, put in place. However many tons it comes to. And BF&S is saying, well, at 1.5 inches thick, it's gonna take 150 tons. So this is what that number's gonna be, or should be. You know, I think that's how that would unfold, you know. It's just like if you were selling mulch, you know, so much a yard or whatever, you know, whether you got 1 yard or 50 yards.
So here's a question. So if Mark goes back to BF&S and, Midwest,
Yeah.
and present this, will you be willing to sign an addendum to the contract that if you come in with this number? And they say no, that raises your,
Sure, that would
Right.
really raise a
Right.
concern, I would think.
right, so let's say that happens. Rather than waiting until the next meeting, can you then tell Mark, if they say no, then rather than waiting until the 9th, you could go ahead and put it out to bid, but advertise then, so then we're not back, that gives us an extra couple weeks, or a week and a half anyway,
A week, more or less.
Yeah. So we don't have to wait for the next meeting. That gives them a little wiggle room as far as negotiation, and we're not buried down in, we can't do anything until the next meeting. Is that something that we can do? We can't give him that authorization to bid it out if he gets a no on that.
I don't see how you can make that decision outside of a public meeting.
So I think the important thing will be is that I'm gonna let BF&S and Midwest know what we need to feel comfortable. And as soon as I hear anything other than yes, I'll be sending an email to all of you saying, we need to have a plan B, yes.
So we're gonna have a meeting and decide.
So I think the answer is yes, because if it's not, then it's not really fair to the bidders. But do we have to go with the lowest bid?
No, but you have to have a good reason not to.
So can we go to the, this seems kind of like unfair to Midwest, but could we go to the second bidder and say, hey, can you come down?
That's not.
You know, you can't,
I know it's
you
not
know,
fair.
yeah, you can't simply because that.
Okay.
Middle of the bid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's not.
because you could do that on every bid, you just, you, my friend,
Yeah.
stack, and you.
And then it's not
So,
really a bid,
Yeah,
it's just,
we'll say,
yeah.
well, you do the sidewalk work, and you do the paving, and you do the, you know, then you would be picking and choosing.
Yeah.
I've had that done to me, and it's not fun.
It's not very ethical.
Yeah, okay.
Then you get people down the road, then they won't try to bid,
So I'll see what I can do, I'll start working on it tomorrow.
Ron, did you say the speed bump is included in this 286, 200 number?
I did,
Yeah.
I did, yeah.
So is that part of the CCG?
The asphalt is, I forget how, I think that was where they had bumped up the quantities on the rock and the asphalt and all that, that was part of that overage on the asphalt.
It's covered in there.
It is.
75%.
The only thing that really wasn't covered in there would be some additional signage that was required for that.
Do we have any, in my great stand, you know, taking engineers' opinions on things, do we have any study of that area concerning the speed bump, like U.S. Department of Transportation recommends and NDOT
No,
recommends?
what we have is BF&S's recommendation versus rumble strips, speed bumps, or speed table. And they settled on the size, location, and everything, and signage required for a speed table. They thought that would be most appropriate for that area versus speed bumps or rumble strips or whatever.
When you guys said look into it on that one email, we had them look into it, they went check Lafayette, and they checked.
Well, I sent an email to all the board members and Mark, and, you know, on U.S. Department of Transportation's, recommendations before, building something, and, getting community input and car counts and some things like that, and, maybe trying other things before you do a speed table or a speed bump, and,
I think it's an emergency situation out
Do you?
there. I think it's an emergency, it's a life or death matter out there. We have,
really,
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 really.
life and death.
I've got, yes, life and death. There's already a 3-inch tree run over down off the road, smashed flat. That was a
On
person
the
that-
slip,
Hold on,
on the
let's
slip,
talk.
slip
Well, let me,
anywhere.
Hold
let me talk. But I've been taking pictures for Marshall Scott of all speeders that go along there. I've got pictures of them. One of the most people that break the law the most down there is the community crossroad people going home every night because there are warehouses out there. But these people, I'm out there every single day, at least 4 or 5 hours a day along that road and back and forth on tractors, on bobcats and mowers, and it's dangerous out there. You know, you do ride up, and I noticed you weren't on the sidewalk, you were in the street, but I mean, I've even got pictures of cars passing other ones between the tracks and right along the nursery, passing them to get out in the country faster. So Sally did research before, there's gonna be 22,000 cars, or there's gonna be, I don't know, 14,000 cars or so with the new subdivision. The way they're building it, guys, that's gonna be done in 2 years. There's all this equipment, tractors, trucks, cement things, there's people already running off the road. You know, I mean, they go by and they're splashing mud up on you and everything. They're so close when you're right along that road. The churches ask for a speed bump. They would like to see it because they say the way the people roar out there and on Sundays and everything, and just the regular stuff during the week, it's dangerous, you know? So I think of all things we do around this town, that's like the country out there.
That's
But it's
right.
in the city, but it's in the town limits we're talking about. But the optical illusion is a country, people get across that tracks and there's skid marks and they roar out there like they're crazy.
Wow, I didn't know that was such
So
a
I'll tell you what,
mystery.
Ashley, come out there and work along there like I do, day in and day out, and you'll see it. I mean, you can sit there and take, if we had a radar gun, we could probably catch 20 people a day going over 40 to 50 miles an hour,
Well, Marshall Taylor
faster
isn't here,
than in here.
Marshall Taylor isn't here to speak on the subject. I know he does sit out there on a pretty frequent basis, and I also see
He's
other
patrolling
police
them.
departments, counties sitting out there, and,
Yeah, it's really-
it's kind of surprising, I haven't seen any cars pulled over by law enforcement officers. Now, I know that, you know, the county area coming into the town, you know, they're coming from a 50-mile-an-hour area into a 25, and, you know, the 25 sign is not until you get, you know, almost the rest of the drive, you know, maybe in front of the
Yeah,
church
usually
there.
go back.
Yeah, so, you know, I think that 25 runs up on people quite a bit, okay? You know, my dad lives on a state highway, okay, and, you know, cutting grass and stuff like that. And whenever he's working in proximity to where there's traffic on the state highway and also on a gravel road that borders his property, you know, he wears a safety vest. You know, he's got slow-moving vehicle sign on his lawnmower. You know, he's got, when he uses his other tractor, it's got, you know, flashing lights, slow-moving vehicle, and also, you know, regular incandescent lights on it. So, you know, he does draw a lot of attention to himself by being prepared to work along the road, which, you know, I think that's, you know, safety 101 is visibility. If you're going to be out on a road, like evidently you are, and you know, so, you know, I think there's some personal responsibility in being, drawing attention to yourself when you're working along the road, you know, for anybody. You know, if people are running off that road, then, you know, it may need some curbing along it. You know, curbing helps people stay on the road to some extent. You know, I'm not saying you can't run over a curbing, but, you know, there's other things that can be done if people are running off the road out there. You know, I know with these coming into Dayton, you know, first off, there's not a town in America that doesn't have a problem when people get off the interstate, they get off the state highway, they do whatever onto county roads into, you know, urban area like Dayton, okay? You know, they're, you know, maybe town, and they all have the same setting we have. You know, I know we did with Marshall Taylor's, applied for the grant, we received money to do the signage on State Road 38, the flashing speed limit sign. And Marshall Taylor has said, I think to all of us on a number of occasions, how well that has worked in slowing traffic coming into this town. You know, that may be an option to try before you start throwing concrete blocks out in the middle of the road to stop people. I'm afraid that we're going to find ourselves in a lawsuit situation the first time a motorcyclist or somebody hits that thing, you know, on a foggy morning or something along those lines at nighttime, and, you know, a rainstorm or something like that. You know, I think that's a pretty big surprise when you're in a country area, and like Ron said, it looks like a country area right now. And yeah, maybe someday there'll be 14 or 17,000 cars or 100 cars or whatever, and, you know, maybe those cars will actually slow down traffic. Normally, when you have more cars, you have a slower traffic pace. It's kind of like driving from Dayton into Lafayette on State Road 38. It may be a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, but I find myself going 50 miles an hour or slower quite a bit because of the traffic, so, you know, I think you all need to slow down for a minute and have this studied a little bit harder. You know, town of Dayton is doing something here that in my 35 years of traveling all over northern Indiana, I have never ever seen in another town, and I've been to a lot of towns.
I'd like to respond.
Hold on. So you're talking about Ron needs to wear a vest and make himself more visible, and that's fine.
I think
Hold on.
anybody that
Okay.
is working on what they perceive as a busy street, or if they feel they are in danger, they ought to be dressed in high visible
Okay, well,
clothes.
right now, there's not a sidewalk going down to Bigger Farms, but there's gonna be. So we can assume that there are gonna be a lot of people on bikes with strollers, walking, whatever, going back and forth. And I don't think we need to expect them to wear orange vests because some person is going 60 miles an hour. And I don't think curbs make sense, the cost for one, and I'm not gonna put up a curb because you won't, not you. I'm not gonna put up a curb because General you wants to speed down the road. Just go the speed limit, okay? So I'd rather slow them down with a speed bump, and I'd rather do it now while we have some money, instead of saying, yeah, we waited a year and a half, we definitely do need the speed bump, let's pay the full price now.
The sidewalk
You
is
know?
gonna be 10 feet off the road. The
And,
sidewalk that's setting out there now ought to be probably 10 feet off the road. I'm not a safety expert, sidewalk expert.
okay,
But the new one we're building is gonna be 10 feet off the road, and it's gonna be a little bit wider, so, you know, people will dress however they dress. If people are scared to walk along a road,
they shouldn't have to be scared.
then generally they don't go, they take a different way, okay, so.
Can I?
And you're worried about our liability, but I don't think that the engineers would have been like, yeah, this sounds good, if they were gonna be like, this sounds good. You're gonna get in a lot of trouble for it, but have at it. So I think you're kind of inflating some issues that don't exist. Okay, go ahead, Ron.
Okay, I've been going around Lafayette, Highland, all over the place. They got multiple speed bumps. Several of them, most of them, you can't even see the white lines anymore. They have no rumble strips, and they have a yield sign before the speed bump. And I'm sure Lafayette, I told the engineers to check with Lafayette, talk to them, diagnose all these speed bumps, look at the pluses and minuses, and I'm sure Lafayette is not so foolish that they would put out speed bumps, and because they would have more of a liability than we would.
What's the speed on both sides of the
Hold on,
street?
let him finish.
Well, Greenbush, for one, is probably 30 or 40, and they roar along there 70 or 80. It's 4
70 or
lanes.
80 miles an hour on Greenbush?
Yeah. I did the apartments, I landscaped the apartments on years ago, and they, well, not with a speed bump now, but you go from crazy down to 52, but let's say they go 40 or 45. What the idea they put a
When
speed
you have speed, you know, 35 on both sides of the speed bump, that's one thing. What we're doing here, in essence, you folks are doing, I'm not, is you're going 50 miles an hour on one side of the speed bump and 25 on the other. And you're putting it out in the country, if you want to speed bump out on Dayton Road, you know, it needs to be closer into that railroad track.
We're putting it in, we're not putting it in the
We're-
country,
we're-
we're putting it in,
People actually are, not in
that's what
between
we're
two
doing.
corners.
Actually, that's what we're doing, we're not putting it way out in the country. But let me finish
We're
one
doing
thing.
that, for
We've,
sure.
we've already,
I mean, we're exactly.
Hold on.
I
Just
just
let him
let you
finish,
talk for
Ashley.
15 minutes without saying a word. We've already okayed the speed bump, we've already okayed, we've had the engineers look at it, it's something we try. Our town right now has multiple speed bumps in the lousy alleys that people go 10 miles an hour, and we have speed bumps. The old board, not this board, the old board, the way old board, the real old board, has used speed bumps many times at different kinds of alleys to keep pedestrians safe and everything. Now, I'm gonna tell you, that tree was 15 foot off to 18 foot off the road if you want to go down and measure. So it didn't matter if there was a sidewalk 12 foot over or not, you were going to be run down flat and killed if you were standing by that tree that day.
On that slick winter day,
Hold on, Ashley.
Okay,
Hold on.
it doesn't, well, okay, let me pick the day when I want to walk down there, because Natalie Still said she was walking down there and couldn't walk along the sidewalks because they're ice covered. So what if she's walking down there, or anybody else? Or do we just say, no, we don't want to get hit today, so we'll only walk down there in the summer? I see people walking all the time, slick days, rainy days, hot days, cold days.
But the tree was hit on a slip.
As far as where you've traveled, I've traveled across America buying antiques. Most of the antiques we buy are in small country towns where the malls are and the antiques are. And I've been in many towns that have a speed bump at almost every corner. I have been in towns where they have stoplights and speed bumps at the corners. I've been in towns where they haven't. But I mean, it's amazing how many speed bumps are out there. Now, we're talking about one speed bump on a highly road that people are roaring along there. They've already run off the road. In my machinery, they can't see a white Bobcat with red lights, or they can't see the orange yield sign on my blue tractor, or they can't see that green and yellow great big John Deere mower or the grasshopper. Then they need more than a speed bump. They need speed bumps, rumble strips, and a lot of other stuff. But we're talking about, we talked before, we discussed it, one speed bump to start it, to slow, I guarantee it'll slow that traffic down, and see how it works. We can always scrape it off the road a year from now, 2 years, 3 years from now. But it's a big safety thing. And like you're coming in town here, you talk about how many people have griped that it has slowed down traffic a lot. But how many people on Facebook, all the sites have continually said, the police ought to sit out here because they're still speeding 50, 60 miles an hour right through the middle of your town. You know, so you need to work out there.
It seems like maybe we need to be petitioning the state to put a speed bump through the center of town. This is actually
Well, it's fine with me. That's fine with me. We're starting out here where right now it's a dangerous situation, Ashley. I mean,
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Carla.
So, your concern, if I'm hearing you correctly, seems to be with a motorcyclist who comes flying into town, too fast, they hit the speed bump.
I'm saying a motorcyclist going 50 miles an hour in the speed bump. I'm saying even a car's got 4 wheels. 2 of those is especially dangerous. Because you got 50 here, 25 there.
Ashley, please just let her finish.
She asked a question.
I was just
She did,
waiting.
she asked him a question.
So, all I'm saying is that that's my understanding, is a motorcycle. It seems to me that if we're gonna put in a speed bump, that would not go without some signage. The speed limit sign is gonna be moved back, I would think. There's gonna be notification of some sort that there's a speed bump coming, something to let people know. It's not just gonna be just tooling along and then bam, you hit a speed bump. Am I correct in that thinking that there would be signage? So if someone's tooling along and they don't see that speed limit's dropping, that they hit where that speed limit is dropping, and that there is a speed bump, and then they hit the speed bump, it's like, we warned you, we really warned you, and here it is. I don't see how that's problematic if you can't read that. For motorcyclists, any motor vehicle. I mean, it's not like we're just sticking it out in the middle of the road. So even with the signage, you still think that it's a problem.
there may be little rumble
Hold on.
strips.
Yeah, to answer your question, I absolutely still think it's a problem. When you're going from an area which is county, okay, and you're coming down that road, it looks like you're, as Ron's mentioned, it looks like you're in the country still until you get up to the church, a little bit past the church, coming from the south, going northbound. You don't have that sense of being in a town or anything like that until you're darn near up here to the railroad track. where exactly is this speed bump going to be? I don't know the exact location of it. I've heard at the old town limits or something like that. You know, I've heard in between the church and Baker Farms, where exactly is it going to be?
I believe it's gonna be just south of the church's entrance and town. So in that little strip, I guess to give you a reference point, I think it's gonna be about where their storm pond is.
The church's storm pond, okay. So, you know, coming from the south, headed north into town, you know, on both sides of the road, this year you got corn, on both sides of the road where you're talking about the speed bump. I think it is very much unexpected for people to encounter a speed bump in that type of location. Yes, I agree, for God's sakes, you need to have tons of signage and, you know, I don't know what else you're going to do. Signage works in most instances, but you know, when you get into, you know, fog situations and, you know, heavy rain situations and stuff like that, you know, sometimes signs get to be less noticeable.
So you should go 60 mile an hour in heavy fog.
Stan, you know, we're talking about 50 mile an hour area, so maybe somebody that's been coming through the county in a heavy fog situation, heavier fog, maybe they're still running 30 miles an hour when they hit that thing, maybe they're still running 20 miles an hour when they hit that thing. You know, they may not ever put on their brakes when they hit that, at whatever speed they're running.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
are we going to change the speed limit signs out to Baker Farms? That is in the town of Dayton. We can stop, we can put a 25 mile an hour sign out there, it's within the town limits.
Well, it should be for the safety of the residents in Baker Farm. If you're right, Ashley, and they're flying this way, coming this way, most of the speeders are heading that way, by the way, but there's a lot of them coming this way, but as they round that 375, we better have some signage, and we've suggested already moving those 25 miles an hour out there, or they're gonna be running right over Baker's Farm people before they even get to that.
People trying to turn in
Speed
or
bump.
pull out of Baker's Farms, and, you know,
So the idea is that coming, so you're northbound, the first sign you would encounter says reduce speed ahead. The next one will be a 25. I believe there's one more 25, and then it would be the signage about speed bump. The speed bump will have signs, plus it will have some pavement markings, some paint on the crossing itself. Going southbound, we need to put up some signage. Instead of just moving some, we need to put up, and it's part of what they've got in mind. So as you're going out of town, it would be, of course, the speed bump ahead sign on this side, but, you know, there's that small strip of land there that is still the county that has a 50 mile per hour speed limit sign up as we sit here, as you're going southbound. So I'm gonna get a hold of the county and say, listen, you know, this is what we're doing. We need to pull that sign out. If you want to leave the post, leave it there for me, and I'm gonna put up a 25 there. You know, so there's several things that are gonna bring, that need to be done out there. But yes, you're right. So you just said something interesting. So they're speeding up more going out of town than coming in, huh?
both.
They're both, but when I sit there, because I'm in our parking lot a lot, one thing real interesting is I asked Scott, and he's patrolling that area more, but I said, Scott, I watch them, I sit at the nursery, they come across that tracks, and the minute those brakes start, those brake lights come on about in front of the nursery, on down, they go slow, and on out. When the cops aren't there, they don't slow down. I said, Scott, you need to sit behind the building and hide a little bit and get them. I mean, it's amazing, they sit out there for a half an hour, they leave, I'm still out there, and all of a sudden they start whizzing on out there.
Part of that might be that county speed limit sign that's out there that says 50 mile per hour.
Yeah, but
That's
on
way
out.
on out.
Yeah,
I know,
that's
but
way-
in their mind, if that's a regular route, in their mind they're saying this is 50.
In terms of 50, ain't there a mile after?
But the speed bump will be before that
Yes,
50-mile-an-hour
yes.
sign,
I'm
so
just saying what people
it's
are
definitely
thinking.
going to slow them down. When they see the signage, when they see the speed bump, the
Yeah.
orange yields, the speed bump sign, they're going to slow down in the motorcycle aspect. It's going to be the same whether you're in Massachusetts or Lafayette or whatever. You got motorcycles going over and you got cars going over them. You know, it's just-
Okay, we have a public comment, and then we're gonna move on, because we have discussed this and we have voted on it before. Go ahead.
Danny Spencer, 752 Main Street. Could you put a stop sign there where Wesleyan comes out onto that road instead of a speed bump?
Sure we could.
Wouldn't that
Or down at 375 or on Shady Lane, you could put a stop sign at each of those.
And it, from the standpoint of, you know, if you move your speed limit reduction way out of town, that's one thing. But I get both sides of the argument. There are obviously a lot of signage, maybe some blinking lights and stuff if you're actually gonna put a speed bump there. But you know, you're talking about putting a speed bump at the end of an aircraft carrier. You know, people are coming in there fast, and it don't matter how many signs you put up. You're gonna get a teenage kid that's gonna fly in there and it's gonna hit that speed bump. But if you put a stop sign there, you know, over the course of time,
Hold on,
Just-
Jonathan.
you're slowing them down, you know, you're slowing them down, and you're moving the problem a little further out of town there. I would imagine at some point, there's probably gonna have to be some kind of a stop sign when you're going into that new development anyways, out there as well, but that kind of maybe solves this conundrum, just my humble opinion.
Well, I think that you were gonna say that, I think if they're gonna fly over a speed bump, they're gonna fly through a stop sign, which might
Well,
cause,
that's, I mean, and that's certainly the case, but, you know, obviously, your town marshal could help with that situation, and over time, it becomes, you know, it's a stop sign. I mean, I know, like, going out the other way out of town there, you know, you've got the stop sign as you come in there. That used to be kind of a drag strip coming in there, and now, you know, you slow down before you get into the actual residential area.
It's still a drag strip, though. they can
Hold on,
fly
I
So,
haven't finished.
but I mean, it's better, I think, you know, bringing them to a stop and policing that, it sort of puts to rest the issue of, you know, someone coming in fast and, you know, hitting that speed bump, and, you know, the issues that would be, you know, involved with that, particularly, like I said, weather conditions and stuff like that. But I think generally speaking, if you stop them again there, then, you know, that really, I think, puts the safety there with the church, because, you know, they don't have enough room to really get up to speed before they're past the church anyways. You know, eventually you're gonna have another problem down the road with the development, but it seems like that would solve the problem.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we put the speed, stop sign at Wesleyan Drive and the speed bump past it, and both of them will take care of the problem. Then if they don't, you know, they'll have to stop, and then the speed bump will be there, so you never have to worry about it again.
I think a stop sign is maybe asking for trouble, because,
Check how many people run the stop sign in Clifty Falls.
yeah.
I gotta go. I can't.
Okay,
Can we get back to the?
we're moving on, yeah, we had already voted
Thing
on
to do,
this.
community crossing mapping, bringing bill roads.
Do we need to make a motion to accept contract number 2?
Well, are you at that point that you wanna go ahead and do that?
For contract number 2, we are.
Number 2, yes.
Who, Pavement Solutions? Okay. I would move to accept the bid for $14,409 from Pavement Solutions for the preservation work.
I second it.
Okay, there's been a motion made by myself and seconded by Stan to accept the bid from Pavement Solutions for the preservation work. Is there any discussion before we vote? Any public? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. This is to accept the bid from Pavement Solutions. How do you vote, Ashley?
Yes,
Stan?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that's accepted 5-0. So with contract number 1, what did we land on? What's the timeline of that?
I'm going to contact BF&S and Midwest Paving to try to get something in writing concerning this 286 to Now, I guess one thing that we have to remember is, let's say that they're milling and they hit a soft spot. And they say, to keep the integrity of this road, we've got to cut out a 10 by 5 section and put some extra rock in here. There's always add-ons. And they say, we're going to charge you $500 to do this. Sometimes you have to do stuff. You know, that's just the nature of road building. But really, what we're saying here is, though, that we're hopeful and we think that it should be, and you think it should be BFNS, and you think it should be 286.2, barring any unforeseen circumstances, I guess is the best way to put it. So that's where we're at.
Okay,
I'm gonna get a hold of both of them. If they're not forthcoming with what we need, I'll let you all know, and we'll go from there.
okay.
And if we need to call a special meeting next week, we will, you know?
Here's one other suggestion. There'll probably be some negative comments here, but several contracts in the past 20 years, we've saved $3,000 to $4,000. I mentioned this to you once, but I mentioned it publicly. These companies don't want to haul all these chips into Lafayette or out their places, so.
The millings?
The millings, they used to haul them and put them on our property, and then we dispersed them, like Mike Harris's pole barns full of the chips, and other people, I would load them up for people, and I would use some. But it saved $3,000 to $4,000. And I would suggest you mention that in there, that will help save a bunch of money, and then it'll help the townspeople too. If anybody wants them, they can come over and get them. Or if you want to set them down on the town's property down there, it doesn't matter, but it'll definitely, those people were always out saving a tremendous amount of hauling, so.
Cool.
I would encourage you not to do that. You know, those chips need to leave this town, and that company will dispose of them the way they dispose of them, typically taking it back to the milling plant. You know, this town has ordinances about, you know, where rock can and can't be used, and you know, I know in the past, you know, some council members, you know, in some respect have received benefit of that. I think it's a very poor look for this town council to do that. I think they just need to leave this town, and if somebody wants to go buy some off of that company, then they can buy them, they can.
Well, that's what I'll do. I'll go buy them actually, but I think that look you're explaining, I want to explain this. After we okayed Malacca's subdivision and everything, Ashley goes down there and he takes 29 dump truck loads of Malacca's topsoil down over, dumps it in a wetland, illegal area. And so how did that look when you grabbed that from the town? Don't you think that should have been not even touched it?
I paid for that topsoil, okay? It was
Well,
not dumped in the illegal
I'll pay for
area.
the chips.
Okay, Mark,
Okay?
Mark,
So, because of this, before I would offer that option to this contractor or any contractor, I would need a vote. Something in, I would need what do you call it, a motion and a vote before I would do that. That way,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So if that's what you choose to do, that's fine, but I can't just do it because you think it's a good idea, you think it's a bad idea.
I think it's a great idea to save the town a few $1,000s. I know it's unfortunate that Ron's gonna be doing something nice for the town by maybe letting him put them on his land until people come pick them up, but
I'm just
it
saying, I
doesn't
need
make
to
sense
cover my
not to
bases.
save the money.
I need to cover my bases is all I'm doing.
I make a motion that we allow these,
Whatever contractor.
whatever
It
contractor
doesn't need
to
be contractor specific.
dispose of their
Millings.
millings on Ron's property, and then he can disperse them to people as they want them.
Wow,
For use by Dayton residents.
wow.
Second.
There's been a motion made by myself and seconded by Ron
Wow.
to save the town a bunch of money by disposing of these things,
What is a bunch of money, how much?
thousands of dollars.
It's not
Is there
been
any
that in the
discussion
past.
before we vote?
It's not been that in the past.
Been 3,000 to 4,000 each time.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. How do you vote, Ashley?
No,
Stan,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Carla,
Yes.
and I vote yes, that passes 4-1. Okay. Anything else, Mark? Okay, having,
Do you need a motion? Just curiosity, do we need a motion for all these Dayton people to bring all their sticks, limb, leaves, and everything to my property too? Or am I benefiting from that?
I have a question.
yes,
So we haven't actually made a motion to approve this bid because we're waiting on an answer, so once we get an answer, then how are we doing this?
We'll do it April 9th after, I mean,
So
we're
we can
making an
wait till-
assumption that
okay.
they're gonna play ball with
Alright.
us.
That's
And then
all
once
I
they
needed to
do,
know. Thank you.
we'll do it August 9th, and we'll be ahead of the September 4th deadline. It's all we get a hold of you if they're not gonna put something firm for us.
before we adjourn, I did want to mention, thanks to Michelle, we sent in the paperwork for the American Rescue Plan money today. So I just want everybody to know that that's in, so I wanted to mention that. Okay, anything else, Mark? Okay, having no other business before us, this meeting is adjourned.